Now let's begin. Samuel McElroy had learned patience in the worst places on Earth. 3 tours in hostile waters, covert operations that never made the news, and 14 years climbing the ranks of naval intelligence had taught him that the best victories came to those who waited. Tonight, as he adjusted his tie in the bathroom mirror of the Greenwood estate, he reminded himself of that lesson. The reflection staring back showed a man of 38, with close-cropped dark hair graying at the temples and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by cruelty. The tuxedo fit perfectly, custom-tailored, paid for with his own money, though Rod Greenwood would never believe that. Men like Rod saw what they wanted to see, and Samuel had learned to use that blindness as a weapon. His phone buzzed. A text from Diane. "Dad's in a mood. Just warning you." Samuel smiled without warmth. Rod Greenwood was always in a mood when Samuel came around. The man had made his fortune in shipping, or so he claimed. Samuel knew better. His intelligence contacts had flagged Greenwood Maritime Holdings 6 months ago for possible sanctions violations, ghost ships moving cargo through embargoed ports, falsified manifests, shell companies in the Caymans. Nothing proven yet, but the walls were closing in. He'd met Diane at a charity gala 8 months ago. She'd been volunteering at a homeless veterans center, one of the few genuine souls in a room full of performative philanthropy. She had her mother's warmth and none of her father's venom. When she'd asked what he did for work, Samuel had simply said, "Government work. Logistics." It wasn't a lie. Their relationship had grown quietly. Samuel had kept his naval career compartmentalized, telling Diane only that he'd served and now consulted for the DoD. He'd let her assume it was desk work, analysis, nothing glamorous. When Rod had demanded to know how Samuel made his living, Samuel had smiled and said, "I manage supply chains." Again, not a lie. Naval logistics was all about supply chains, weapons, intelligence, personnel. Rod had sneered. "So you're a middle manager. How adequate." The estate sprawled across 15 acres in Connecticut's Gold Coast, all marble columns and imported Italian statuary. Samuel walked through the foyer where a portrait of Rod dominated the wall, the man painted as some kind of seafaring captain, though Rod hadn't worked a real day on the water in his life. His empire was built on exploiting those who did. The dining room could seat 20. Tonight, it was just 6. Rod at the head, his wife Margie at the foot, Diane and Samuel on one side, and Rod's brother George and George's daughter Kendra on the other. The table was set with china that cost more than most people's cars. "Samuel," Margie Greenwood said with forced brightness. She was a thin woman in her 50s, all nerves and placating smiles. "So good to see you again, Mrs. Greenwood." Samuel helped Diane with her chair before sitting himself. Rod didn't look up from his phone. "Hope you didn't struggle with the dress code. I know these formal dinners can be challenging for some people." Diane's hand found Samuel's under the table, squeezing. "Dad, what?" "I'm just making conversation." Rod finally looked at Samuel, his eyes cold and assessing. Rod was 62, but maintained the aggressive fitness of someone fighting age with money and spite. His silver hair was styled to look casual, but probably cost more than Samuel's entire outfit. "Diane tells me you two are getting serious." "We are," Samuel said evenly. Rod leaned back as servers brought the first course. "And what are your intentions exactly?" George Greenwood chuckled nervously. He was younger than Rod, softer, the kind of man who'd spent his life in his brother's shadow. "Rod, maybe let them eat first. I'm asking a simple question. My daughter's future is at stake." Rod's voice carried the certainty of a man who'd never been told no. "I've built something extraordinary. Greenwood Maritime is a legacy. Whoever marries into this family needs to understand what that means." "I understand legacy," Samuel said quietly. "My grandfather served in World War II. My father in Vietnam. I believe in building something that lasts." Noble sentiments from a government contractor. Rod practically spat the last word. "Tell me, when you fill out your timesheets, do you round up or down?" The table fell silent. Kendra, Rod's niece, studied her plate. She was 25, worked in Rod's accounting department, and had the haunted look of someone who saw where the bodies were buried. "Dad, that's enough," Diane said, color rising in her cheeks. "I'm trying to understand what kind of man wants to marry my daughter. Is that so wrong?" Rod turned to Samuel. "See, I did my research. You work for a DoD consulting firm. Low 6 figures. Respectable for your station, I suppose." But Diane's accustomed to a certain lifestyle. Samuel had known this was coming. Men like Rod needed to establish dominance, especially when they felt threatened. And Rod felt threatened by anyone who might dilute his control over Diane. "I can provide for her," Samuel said. "Provide?" Rod laughed, a harsh bark. "You think love conquers all? This isn't a fairy tale. Diane has trust funds worth more than you'll make in your lifetime. She has expectations, which I can meet," Samuel said, his voice still calm. This was the most important part, staying controlled while Rod escalated. Men like Rod mistook calmness for weakness. The dinner continued in tense silence through the fish course. Samuel could feel the storm building. Rod had been drinking steadily, his movements getting sharper, his comments more cutting. Margie kept trying to redirect conversation to safe topics. Diane's charity work, the upcoming regatta, anything. But Rod circled back like a shark. "I started with nothing," Rod announced during the main course, as if anyone had asked. "Built my company from a single cargo ship. Do you know what that takes? Vision, ruthlessness, the ability to make hard decisions." "I'm familiar with hard decisions," Samuel said. "Are you?" Rod leaned forward. "Because from where I'm sitting, you've made the easiest decision in the world. Latch onto a rich man's daughter. Let her family's money smooth your path." "That's not," Diane started. "I'm talking to your boyfriend." Rod's face was flushed now. "I've seen it 1,000 times. Men without ambition, without drive, thinking they can marry into success. You know what I see when I look at you, Samuel? I see a man who's settled. A man who's peaked. Government contractor." He said it like a curse. "You'll spend your life in meetings, watching the clock, waiting for your pension." Samuel cut his steak with careful precision. "You don't know anything about my work. I know enough. I know men like you. Content with mediocrity. My daughter deserves better. Better like you?" The words were out before Samuel could stop them, quiet but sharp. The table froze. Rod's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me. I said better like you. Since we're being honest about worth." Samuel met Rod's gaze steadily. "You want to measure success? Let's measure it. You exploit workers, cut corners on safety, pay off inspectors to avoid regulations. Your company moves cargo you don't ask questions about because the money's too good." Rod's face went from red to purple. "How dare you? You want to know what I see when I look at you?" Samuel continued, his voice level but hard. "I see a man who inherited money, pretended he earned it, and built an empire on the backs of people he considers beneath him. You talk about legacy? Your legacy is buying your way out of consequences. Get out." Rod stood so fast his chair toppled backward. "Get out of my house." "Dad." Diane was on her feet too. Samuel didn't mean. "Oh, I think he meant every word." Rod's hands were shaking. "This is what happens when you bring street trash to a family dinner, Diane. They forget their place." Margie was crying softly. George looked like he wanted to disappear. Kendra watched with wide eyes. Samuel stood slowly, folding his napkin. "I apologize. That was inappropriate." "Damn right it was." Rod grabbed a cup of coffee from the server, who'd appeared to clear plates. "You want to know your place? Let me show you." Samuel saw it coming, but didn't move. Rod threw the hot coffee directly in his face. The liquid scalded, burning his skin. Samuel's eyes closed reflexively, but he didn't flinch, didn't raise his hands. He just stood there, coffee dripping down his face, his shirt, his expensive tuxedo. "You'll never be good enough for my daughter, waiter boy." Rod's voice dripped contempt. "Not in this life, or the next." The room erupted. Diane screamed, rushing to Samuel with napkins. Margie was sobbing. George finally found his spine enough to say, "Rod, Jesus Christ, what's wrong with you?" Samuel wiped his face slowly, methodically. The coffee hadn't been hot enough to cause real damage. Rod was too controlled for that, just hot enough to humiliate. Samuel's eyes opened, focusing on Rod with an intensity that made the older man take a step back. "I understand," Samuel said quietly. "Thank you for clarifying where we stand." He turned to Diane. "I should go? I'll call you tomorrow." "Samuel, please." Her face was streaked with tears, horrified by her father's actions. "It's fine. Really." He kissed her forehead. "This isn't your fault." He walked out of the dining room, through the obscene foyer, past the servants who'd heard everything. His car was in the circular drive, a modest sedan that Rod had probably mocked to the valet. Samuel got in, started the engine, and drove exactly the speed limit down the long driveway. Only when he was 5 miles away did he pull over, taking out his phone. His face still burned, his shirt was ruined, but his hands were steady as he made the first call. Admiral McElroy. A voice answered immediately. Didn't expect to hear from you tonight, sir. Captain Holland. I need you to pull the file on Greenwood Maritime Holdings. Everything we've compiled. Sir, that investigation is still preliminary. We don't have enough for. I'll get you enough. How fast can you assemble a joint task force? Coast Guard, Treasury, DOD. A pause. 72 hours if I push. Sir, what happened? Samuel looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. Coffee stained his face, his eyes hard and cold. Rod Greenwood just made a very expensive mistake. He thinks I'm nobody. Let's show him exactly who I am. Understood, sir. I'll have the briefing ready by morning. Samuel hung up and made his second call. This one to a commander in the Coast Guard he'd worked with in the Gulf. Then another to Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control. Then one to a contact at the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. By the time he pulled into his apartment in Hartford, he'd made 7 calls. The coffee had dried on his skin, sticky and uncomfortable. He stripped off the ruined tuxedo, showered, and stood under the hot water, letting his mind work through the pieces. Rod Greenwood had no idea who he'd just humiliated. In Rod's world, title and money were everything. He saw a government contractor and assumed mediocrity. He saw Samuel's modest lifestyle and assumed poverty. He'd never thought to look deeper, to ask the right questions, to wonder why Diane, smart, educated, cautious, had fallen for someone so beneath her station. Samuel had spent 8 months gathering intelligence, not on Rod directly, but because Rod's shipping empire kept appearing in investigations Samuel ran. Ghost ships moving weapons to conflict zones. Cargo manifests that didn't match actual shipments. Port officials suddenly wealthy after Greenwood vessels docked. It was all circumstantial, nothing actionable, until Samuel had started dating Diane and realized the scope of Rod's arrogance. Men who believed themselves untouchable made mistakes. They cut corners. They bragged. They kept sloppy records because they couldn't imagine facing consequences. Samuel had planned to approach this carefully, professionally, through proper channels. But Rod had just made it personal. The coffee to the face, the public humiliation, the casual cruelty. It wasn't just about Samuel. It was about every person Rod had ever looked down on, ever exploited, ever destroyed for profit. His phone buzzed. Diane calling. He let it go to voicemail, then listened to her tearful apology. She was horrified, wanted to make it right, couldn't believe her father had done that. Samuel texted back, "Not your fault. Need a few days to think. I love you." The truth was, he did love her. That complicated things. But Diane deserved to know who her father really was. She deserved better than to build her life on blood money. Samuel spent the night at his kitchen table, his personal laptop open, cross-referencing data. As a rear admiral in naval intelligence, he had access to information that would make Rod's lawyers weep. Financial transactions flagged by Fiancée. Satellite imagery of Greenwood vessels in suspicious waters. Communications intercepts from foreign intelligence services. The yacht, the Greenwood's pride, a 150-foot monstrosity Rod had bought last year, was registered under a shell company in the Marshall Islands. Standard tax evasion. But the vessel had made 3 trips to ports known for arms trafficking. The last trip, just 2 months ago, had coincided with a major weapons seizure in West Africa. Greenwood's ship hadn't been caught, but the timing was interesting. Samuel made notes, built timelines, identified pressure points. By dawn, he had a strategy. It wasn't just about taking Rod down. Anyone could do that with enough evidence. It was about making Rod understand exactly how badly he'd miscalculated, how thoroughly he'd underestimated the waiter boy who'd wiped coffee off his face in silence. At 0600, Samuel called Captain Holland back. "I need a Coast Guard cutter in Long Island Sound, Saturday morning. Can you make that happen? For inspection purposes? We need probable cause. You'll have it by Friday. Rod Greenwood's yacht, the Greenwood's pride. I need it seized. Admiral, with respect, that's a bold move. If we're wrong, we're not wrong. I'll have evidence of OFAC violations by end of day Thursday. The yacht's registered to a shell company that's been sanctioned. We'll have legal authority to seize. And if Greenwood lawyers up, let them. The seizure will be legitimate. What happens after?" Samuel smiled without humor. "That's when things get interesting. He spent Thursday in meetings at the federal building, coordinating between agencies that didn't normally play well together. Coast Guard wanted jurisdiction. Treasury wanted the financial crimes. FBI wanted the smuggling charges. Samuel orchestrated them like a conductor, giving each agency enough to justify their involvement while keeping control of the broader strategy. By Thursday evening, he had warrants. By Friday morning, he had Coast Guard approval for a routine inspection of vessels in the Sound. By Friday afternoon, he had confirmation that Rod planned to take the Greenwood's Pride out Saturday morning for a day cruise with business associates. Perfect. Samuel called Diane Friday night. She answered on the first ring, her voice anxious. Samuel, thank God. Are you okay? I've been so worried. I'm fine. The coffee was mostly for show. Dad was drunk. He gets like that sometimes. I'm so sorry. I talked to him, and he feels terrible. Does he? Samuel kept his voice gentle. Diane didn't deserve his anger. Did he say that? Or did you say he should feel that way? A pause. He didn't apologize, if that's what you mean. But he will. I'll make him. Don't. It's not your job to manage his cruelty. He's my father, Samuel. He's difficult, but he's family. And I love you. We can work through this. Samuel closed his eyes. I love you too. That's why I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Of course. What's wrong? You sound strange. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. Your father's going to be very angry. At me, not you. But you need to know something about who I am. You're scaring me. Your father called me a waiter boy. He thinks I'm nobody. I let him think that because it was easier than explaining what I actually do. Samuel, what are you talking about? He took a breath. I'm a rear admiral in the United States Navy. Naval Intelligence. I've been on active duty for 14 years. I'm not a consultant. I'm not a middle manager. I run operations that directly impact national security. Silence on the line. Then, quietly, why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to know me, not my rank. Because I've seen what military relationships look like when they're built on title instead of connection. And because... He paused. Because your father's business has been under investigation for sanctions violations. I didn't run that investigation, but I'm aware of it. I kept my distance because of you. Investigation? Her voice shook. What kind of investigation? The kind that ends with federal charges if the evidence holds. I'm sorry, Diane. I know this isn't what you want to hear. My father isn't perfect, but he's not a criminal. This is about the coffee, isn't it? You're trying to get back at him. I'm trying to show you who he is. What he's built his empire on. By destroying him? She was crying now. Is that your plan? Humiliate me and my family because your ego was bruised. The word stung because part of Samuel wondered if she was right. Was this about justice or revenge? It's not about ego. It's about accountability. Your father has been breaking laws for years, exploiting people, profiting from human misery. The coffee just accelerated my timeline. I can't believe this. I thought you were different. But you're just another man trying to prove how powerful you are. Diane, don't. I need to think. Don't call me for a while. The line went dead. Samuel stared at his phone, feeling the weight of what he'd set in motion. He could stop this. One call, and the Coast Guard inspection would be delayed, postponed, eventually forgotten. Rod would continue his illegal operations. The cycle would continue. But then Samuel remembered the coffee dripping down his face. Rod's contempt. The way Margie had cried silently, used to her husband's cruelty. The haunted look in Kendra's eyes as she watched her uncle's rage. No. Some things couldn't be forgiven just because they were inconvenient. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for sailing. Samuel stood on the deck of the Coast Guard cutter USCGC Seneca, binoculars in hand, watching the marina where Rod kept his yacht. He wore his service khakis, ribbons on his chest, the 2 stars of a rear admiral on his collar. Commander Brett Norris stood beside him, the Seneca's commanding officer and a man Samuel had worked with on 3 previous operations. There's our target, Norris said, pointing to where the Greenwood's Pride was preparing to depart. Even from a distance, the yacht was ostentatious, all white and gold trim. Flying American flags like Rod was some kind of patriot. How do you want to play this, Admiral? By the book. We have legal authority to inspect any vessel we suspect of registry violations. The Greenwood's Pride is registered to Seabourn Holdings LLC, which was sanctioned last month for doing business with embargoed entities. We board, we inspect, we seize if warranted. And if Mr. Greenwood objects? Samuel lowered the binoculars, his expression hard. Then he can object from the dock while we tow his yacht to impound. They watched Rod board with 3 other men, business associates from the look of their expensive casual wear. George was there too, looking nervous. The yacht's engines rumbled to life. All ahead slow, Norris ordered. Intercept course. The cutter moved smoothly through the water, timing their approach to meet the Greenwood's Pride just as it cleared the marina's breakwater. Samuel felt the familiar calm that came before action. This was what he'd trained for: precision, timing, control. The yacht's captain spotted them and adjusted course slightly, but the Seneca was faster and better positioned. Within minutes, they'd pulled alongside, close enough to hail. United States Coast Guard. Norris's voice boomed through the speaker. Vessel Greenwood's Pride. Prepare to be boarded for inspection. Samuel could see Rod on the deck now, his face already turning that familiar purple. He grabbed a radio from the yacht's captain, his voice crackling over the channel. This is ridiculous. I'm an American citizen in American waters. You have no right. We have every right, Mr. Greenwood, Norris responded. Your vessel is registered to an entity under federal sanctions. Cut your engines and prepare for boarding. I will not. Do you know who I am? I'll have your badge for this. Samuel took the radio from Norris. Mr. Greenwood, this is Rear Admiral Samuel McElroy, United States Navy. Cut your engines immediately, or I will authorize the Coast Guard to disable them for you. The silence over the radio was profound. Samuel could see Rod's face through the binoculars, shock giving way to recognition, then fury. You, Rod hissed. You set this up. This is harassment. This is a legal inspection of a vessel registered to a sanctioned entity. Now cut your engines. The yacht's engines died. The boarding party moved with practiced efficiency. 8 Coast Guardsmen crossing to the Greenwood's Pride, securing the deck, beginning their inspection. Samuel crossed last, stepping onto the yacht's pristine deck with deliberate calm. Rod was waiting, surrounded by his confused business associates. Up close, Samuel could see the man's rage barely contained. This is absurd. That registration is perfectly legal. Is it? Samuel handed him a document. That's a copy of the OFAC sanctions list. Seabourn Holdings LLC, your yacht's registered owner, was added last month. Any assets owned by sanctioned entities are subject to seizure. That's a mistake. A clerical error. My lawyers will. Your lawyers can file an appeal. In the meantime, this vessel is being detained pending investigation into possible sanctions violations. Detained? Rod's voice climbed. You can't just steal my yacht. I'm not stealing anything. The United States Coast Guard is executing a lawful seizure under the Trading with the Enemy Act and the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Samuel's voice remained level, almost bored. You'll receive formal notification within 72 hours. You can contest the seizure in federal court. One of the Coast Guard investigators emerged from below deck carrying a file box. Admiral, you'll want to see this. Samuel opened the box. Inside were manifests, communications logs, and financial records. His eyebrows rose. Mr. Greenwood, can you explain why your yacht has detailed cargo manifests for Greenwood maritime vessels? Specifically manifests that don't match the official documents filed with customs. Rod's face went white. Those are private business records. You have no right. We have every right during a legal inspection, especially when those records indicate possible fraud and smuggling. Samuel handed the box to the investigator. Catalog everything. I want copies to Treasury and FBI by end of day. This is a setup. Rod lunged forward, but 2 Coast Guardsmen stepped between him and Samuel. You're doing this because of the dinner. Because your feelings were hurt. Samuel met his eyes calmly. I'm doing this because you're a criminal who's been exploiting legal loopholes for years. The dinner just made me take a closer look at your operation. Diane will never forgive you for this. Maybe not, but she deserves to know the truth about who her father is. Samuel turned to Norris. Commander, please escort Mr. Greenwood and his guests to shore. The yacht stays with us. You can't. I won't, Rod sputtered, his carefully controlled image crumbling. You will, or you'll be arrested for interfering with a federal investigation. Your choice. The fight went out of Rod then. He looked around at his yacht, his symbol of success and power, being picked apart by investigators. His business associates were already on their phones to lawyers. George was sitting on a deck chair, his head in his hands. Sir, one of the investigators called to Samuel. We found something else. Hidden compartment in the master cabin. Looks like financial records, possibly encrypted communication equipment. Samuel nodded. Document and secure it all. Rod watched, helpless, as his empire's secrets were boxed up and labeled as evidence. When the Coast Guardsmen finally escorted him to the cutter's small boat for the ride back to shore, he looked back at Samuel with pure hatred. I will destroy you, Rod said. I will use every resource I have to bury you. Samuel stood at the rail, the sun behind him. The yacht, now legally the property of the United States government pending investigation, gleaming white in the morning light. You're welcome to try, Mr. Greenwood. But here's something you should understand. Samuel leaned forward slightly. I've faced enemy combatants in war zones. I've run intelligence operations against hostile nations. I've made decisions that cost lives and save thousands more. You're a businessman who throws coffee when he's angry. We're not in the same league. He straightened. Oh, and Mr. Greenwood? You can call me Admiral. Or Sir. But never again call me waiter boy. Rod was still sputtering as the boat pulled away. Samuel watched until they reached the dock, then turned to Norris. How long until we can tow this to the impound yard? 2 hours for the paperwork. We'll have her secured by this afternoon. Good. Make sure everything's documented. I want this seizure to be bulletproof. Samuel spent the rest of the day aboard the Greenwood's Pride, directing the investigation. What they found exceeded even his expectations. Years of fraudulent manifests, communications with sanctioned entities, evidence of systematic customs fraud. Rod hadn't just bent the rules. He'd created an entire shadow operation running parallel to his legitimate business. By the time Samuel returned to shore that evening, 3 federal agencies had opened formal investigations. Rod Greenwood's empire was about to become very uncomfortable. His phone had 17 missed calls from Diane. He listened to the voicemails in his car. The first few were angry, accusing, then confused, then, finally, tearful and lost. I saw the news. They're saying my father's business is being investigated, that his yacht was seized. Is this what you meant about accountability? Call me, please. Samuel called her back. She answered immediately. Is it true? She asked without preamble. Everything they're saying on the news? The yacht seizure is true. The investigations are true. The evidence we found is real. Why didn't you tell me? Why did I have to learn about this from reporters calling my phone? Because until today, it was just suspicions. Now we have proof. Proof of what exactly? That your father's company has been systematically violating sanctions laws, smuggling restricted goods, and filing fraudulent customs declarations. We found manifests showing weapons shipments to embargoed nations, communications with entities on the terrorism watch list, financial records indicating millions in unreported income. He heard her sharp intake of breath. That's not possible. My father built that company legally. He's made mistakes, but he's not what you're describing. I know this is hard to hear, but the evidence doesn't lie. Evidence you went looking for because you wanted revenge. Samuel closed his eyes. I went looking because I needed to know who I was planning to marry into. When I started dating you, I did a background check, standard procedure for someone in my position. Your father's name kept appearing in intelligence reports. I tried to ignore it, tried to believe it was coincidence. But after the dinner, I couldn't pretend anymore. So you destroyed him. I exposed him. There's a difference. Not to me. Not to my family. Her voice broke. I loved you. I thought we were building something real. We are. Diane, your father is not your identity. His crimes aren't your responsibility. But his destruction is yours. She took a shaky breath. I need to go. My mother needs me. The press is outside our house. Everything's falling apart. Diane, don't. Just don't. I can't talk to you right now. The line went dead. Samuel sat in his car in the parking lot, feeling the weight of his choices. He'd accomplished his mission. Rod Greenwood was finished. But he'd lost Diane in the process, and that hurt more than he'd expected. His phone rang. Captain Holland. Admiral, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Greenwood hired Marcus Vance, former federal prosecutor, now white-collar defense attorney. He's filed emergency motions in 3 different courts challenging the seizure. Claims the sanctions designation was retroactive, that we had no probable cause, that the entire operation was motivated by personal animus. Let him file. The seizure was legal. That's not all. He subpoenaed your relationship with Diane Greenwood. claims you used your position to target her father out of spite. Samuel felt ice form in his chest. That's ridiculous. Maybe, but it's going to be a problem. If Greenwood can prove personal motivation, even if the underlying evidence is solid, he might get the whole thing thrown out on procedural grounds. This was the danger Samuel had known about but hoped to avoid. Personal involvement in an investigation could taint the whole process. The investigation started before I met Diane. We have records. But you accelerated it after the coffee incident. Greenwood's lawyers will argue that you used your position for personal revenge. Then we'll prove otherwise. The evidence stands on its own. I hope you're right, Admiral. Because Greenwood just went on TV calling you a corrupt officer who abused his power to settle a personal grudge. This is about to get very messy. Samuel hung up and turned on the car radio. Sure enough, Rod was on every news channel, perfectly composed, playing the victim. Gone was the purple-faced rage from the yacht. This was Rod the businessman, Rod the philanthropist, shocked and appalled by the overreach of federal power. I've spent 40 years building my company legally and ethically, Rod told the camera, his voice dripping with injured dignity. Then I have one dinner with my daughter's boyfriend, and suddenly my yacht is seized, my business investigated. This isn't law enforcement. This is a vendetta. The interviewer, a carefully coiffed blonde, leaned forward sympathetically. Are you saying Rear Admiral McElroy targeted you personally? I'm saying it's quite a coincidence that we have a disagreement at dinner, and 24 hours later my assets are being confiscated. Samuel McElroy is using his position to punish me for not approving of his relationship with my daughter. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth, and I intend to prove it in court. No one, not even a military officer, is above the law. The irony was almost funny. Almost. Samuel drove home, knowing sleep would be impossible. His apartment was modest, a one-bedroom in Hartford that he barely decorated because he was deployed so often. On the wall was his father's Purple Heart from Vietnam. On the shelf, his grandfather's dog tags from Normandy. 3 generations of McElroys who'd served their country, who'd believed in duty and honor. What would they think of what he was doing? Was this duty, or was Diane right? Was it just revenge dressed up as justice? His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You made a big mistake, Admiral. I have friends in very high places. This won't end well for you. Rod, of course, threatening him through burner phones like some kind of gangster. Samuel almost laughed. Did Rod really think threats would work? After everything Samuel had seen and done? He typed back, looking forward to seeing you in court, Mr. Greenwood. Make sure you bring those manifests we found, especially the ones showing weapons shipments to Syria. Then he blocked the number and made himself a drink. Over the next 72 hours, the situation escalated. Rod's lawyers filed motion after motion, challenging the seizure, demanding evidence be suppressed, claiming violations of his constitutional rights. The media coverage was relentless. Half the outlets painted Samuel as a crusader fighting corruption. The other half suggested he was a jealous lover abusing his power. Diane wouldn't take his calls. Her voicemail was full. Then, on Tuesday, things shifted. The FBI executed search warrants on Greenwood Maritime's offices. Not because of Samuel's evidence, because their own white-collar crime division had been building a parallel case for months. Turns out Samuel hadn't been the only one noticing Rod's suspicious activities. The FBI found evidence of money laundering, tax evasion, and yes, smuggling. Suddenly Rod's narrative of persecution fell apart. This wasn't one spurned boyfriend with a grudge. This was multiple federal agencies independently concluding that Rod Greenwood was a criminal. By Wednesday, Rod's story changed. He stopped playing victim and started cutting deals. His lawyers reached out to Treasury, to the FBI, offering cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. It was the oldest move in the book. Throw someone else under the bus to save yourself. Rod offered up his business partners, named names, provided evidence, turned government witness against the very people he'd worked with for decades. It was cowardice disguised as cooperation, and it made Samuel's jaw clench in disgust. Rats always flee the sinking ship, Captain Holland said when he briefed Samuel on the deal. But in this case, we'll take it. The people Greenwood's rolling on are bigger fish. Arms dealers, sanctions busters, the whole network. And Greenwood walks. Reduced charges. Financial penalties. Probably no jail time, given his age and cooperation. Samuel felt the unfairness of it burn. He commits crimes for decades, and he gets a fine? That's how the system works sometimes, Admiral. We don't always get justice, but we get results. Samuel understood. He didn't like it, but he understood. The bigger picture mattered more than his personal satisfaction. Still, the knowledge that Rod would escape real consequences gnawed at him. Thursday brought a new development. Kendra Greenwood requested a meeting with federal investigators. She walked into the FBI office with boxes of financial records she'd been secretly copying for months, her hands shaking but her voice steady. Samuel watched the interview through one-way glass, Holland beside him. "I've known for 2 years that Uncle Rod was breaking laws," Kendra said. "I kept copies of everything because I knew someday someone would ask questions. I was just too scared to bring it forward myself." "Why come forward now?" the FBI agent asked. "Because I saw Admiral McElroy stand up to him. I saw someone finally not backing down from Rod's bullying. And I realized I'd been a coward long enough." The records Kendra provided filled in gaps even Samuel's evidence hadn't touched. Shell companies, bribery schemes, systematic fraud going back 15 years. It was devastating, comprehensive, and it changed everything. Rod's deal fell apart when prosecutors realized they didn't need his cooperation. They had Kendra's evidence. Suddenly Rod was facing decades in federal prison, his cooperation worthless. Friday afternoon, Samuel received a call from an unexpected source, Margie Greenwood. "Admiral McElroy?" Her voice was soft, tentative. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all, Mrs. Greenwood. How can I help you?" "I wanted to apologize. For my husband's behavior. For not stopping him when he threw that coffee. For a lot of things." Samuel closed his eyes. "You don't need to apologize for his actions. But I do. I've spent 30 years making excuses for Rod. Telling myself his anger was just stress, that his cruelty was just passion for his business. I knew he was bending rules. I suspected worse. But I never had the courage to look closely. That's not an easy thing to admit." "No, but it's the truth." She took a shaky breath. "Diane is very angry with you. She thinks you destroyed our family. I understand why she feels that way. Do you love her?" The question caught Samuel off guard. "Yes, very much." "Then give her time. She's lost before. Her brother died when she was 16, a car accident. She blamed herself for years because she'd asked him to pick her up from a party. She processes grief by pushing people away. But if you're patient, if you really love her, she'll come back." "Thank you for telling me that. I'm telling you because you did the right thing. What Rod did, what he built, it was poisonous. It corrupted our family. Diane deserves better than to inherit that legacy." Margie's voice strengthened. "I'm filing for divorce. And I'm cooperating with the prosecutors. My lawyer says I might face charges too for signing some documents. But I don't care anymore. I'm done protecting him." After the call, Samuel sat in his office staring at the photo on his desk, him and Diane at a veterans charity event, both of them laughing at something stupid he'd said. She looked so happy, so full of light. Had he extinguished that light by exposing her father? The following week brought Rod's arraignment. Samuel attended, sitting in the back of the courtroom in civilian clothes. Rod was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his silver hair disheveled, his arrogance replaced by hollow shock. The charges were read, 47 counts including money laundering, sanctions violations, smuggling, fraud, and conspiracy. Rod's eyes found Samuel in the gallery. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then Rod looked away, defeated. Bail was set at $20 million. Rod couldn't make it. His assets were frozen, his accounts under investigation. He was remanded to custody. As marshals led Rod away, Samuel heard him mutter to his lawyer, "I just didn't think he'd really do it." That was the problem with men like Rod. They never thought anyone would actually hold them accountable. Samuel walked out of the courthouse into late afternoon sun. His phone buzzed. A text from Diane. "I saw the news. Can we talk?" They met at a coffee shop in West Hartford, neutral territory. Diane looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled. She ordered chamomile tea. Samuel got black coffee, then thought better of it and switched to tea too. They sat across from each other in silence for a long moment. "I owe you an apology," Diane finally said. "I said terrible things. Accused you of petty revenge when you were trying to do the right thing. You were protecting your family. I understand that." "My family?" She laughed bitterly. "Turns out I didn't know them at all. My father's a criminal. My mother's filing for divorce and cooperating with prosecutors. Kendra's a hero who apparently spent years documenting my father's crimes while I smiled and went to galas funded by blood money. You didn't know, didn't I? Diane met his eyes. Or did I just not want to know? My father was always cruel, always cutting corners, always treating people like they were beneath him. I told myself it was just his personality, his generation, his stress. But the signs were there. You're not responsible for his choices. No, but I benefited from them. The trust fund he mentioned? Built on smuggling and fraud. The lifestyle I took for granted? Paid for with illegal profits. She wrapped her hands around her teacup. I'm giving it all back. The money, the trust funds, everything. It's tainted. Diane, you don't have to. I do. For me, not for anyone else. I can't build a life on that foundation. She looked up at him. My mother told me you called me brave once. Do you still think that? Yes. More than ever. Then help me be brave now. Help me figure out who I am when I'm not Rod Greenwood's daughter. Samuel reached across the table, taking her hand. I'd be honored. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing. Diane asked about his military career, and for the first time, Samuel told her the truth, the deployments, the operations, the weight of command. She told him about her brother's death, her guilt, the way her father had used her grief to control her. He told me I couldn't trust my judgment after Michael died, she said quietly, that I needed his guidance. I believed him, let him run my life for years. You trusted your judgment when you met me, Samuel pointed out. She smiled, tentative but real. I did, didn't I? Even when he told me you weren't good enough. To be fair, I am a lowly government contractor, Rear Admiral in Naval Intelligence. I Googled you properly after the yacht thing. You've got a silver star, 2 bronze stars. You've advised 3 different presidential administrations. The internet exaggerates. The internet says you're a genuine hero, and you still let my father throw coffee in your face without fighting back. I knew something he didn't. I knew who I was. His opinion couldn't change that. Diane squeezed his hand. I'm still angry, you know. Part of me wishes you'd handled it differently, given me warning, protected me from the fallout. I know. I'm sorry for that. The timing, the way it happened, I could have done better. But you did what was right, even knowing it would cost you. Cost us. She blinked back tears. I don't know if we can get back what we had. Then we'll build something new. Something stronger, because it's built on truth instead of secrets. They left the coffee shop holding hands, stepping out into the evening. It wasn't a happy ending, not yet. But it was a beginning. Over the following months, Samuel watched Rod Greenwood's empire crumble. The trial was swift. Kendra's evidence combined with the manifest from the yacht left little room for defense. Rod's lawyers tried every angle, but the facts were damning. The jury took 4 hours to convict on all counts. At sentencing, the judge was merciless. Mr. Greenwood, you were given every advantage in life. Wealth, education, opportunity. Instead of building something honorable, you chose to profit from human suffering. You sold weapons that killed children. You enriched dictators and terrorists. You corrupted everyone around you. Rod stood silent, a shell of the man who'd thrown coffee with such contempt. I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison. You will forfeit all assets gained through illegal activity. You will pay restitution in the amount of $147 million. And you will register as a federal offender for the remainder of your natural life. 25 years. At 62, Rod would be 87 when released, if he lived that long. Samuel wasn't in the courtroom for sentencing. He was on a Navy base in Virginia, briefing a new operation. But he heard about it from Diane, who called him that evening. It's over, she said. Really over. How do you feel? Sad, relieved, angry, grateful, all of it at once. A pause. He asked to see me before they transferred him to the federal facility. I said no. You don't owe him anything. I know. My therapist keeps telling me that. But he's still my father, and part of me. She trailed off. Part of you wishes he'd been different. Yes, exactly that. She sighed. My mother's doing better. She got a job at a nonprofit, entry-level work, but she says it feels good to earn her own money. George is cooperating with investigators too. Turns out he was more involved than anyone thought. Kendra got immunity for her testimony. She's starting over in Seattle, using her maiden name. And you? I'm working at the Veterans Center full-time now. Actual work, not just showing up for photos. The pay is terrible, but it's honest. I'm learning who I am without the Greenwood name. I'm proud of you. Are you? Her voice softened. Because I need to ask you something. That ring you bought, the one I assumed you were going to give me before everything exploded, do you still have it? Samuel's heart stuttered. I do. Good. Don't get rid of it. I'm not ready yet, but... She took a breath. Ask me again someday. When I've figured out who Diane Andrews is without her father's shadow. When I can say yes to you and mean it with my whole heart. I'll wait as long as you need. I know. That's why I love you. 3 years later, Samuel stood on the deck of a different yacht. This one a modest 40-footer he'd bought with his own savings. Diane stood beside him in a simple white dress, her hand in his, as a Navy chaplain married them in a quiet ceremony attended by 30 people. Margie was there, proud and tearful. Kendra flew in from Seattle with her new husband. Several of Samuel's Navy colleagues attended, including Captain Holland, who served as best man. The veterans from the center where Diane worked came too. These men and women who'd rebuilt their lives from nothing. Rod Greenwood wasn't invited. He sent a letter from prison that Diane left unopened. As the chaplain pronounced them married, Samuel kissed his wife and thought about the journey that had brought them here. The coffee in his face, the yacht seizure, the investigations, the trial, the slow rebuilding of trust. Any regrets? Diane whispered as they held each other. Samuel looked out at the water, thinking of Rod Greenwood in a federal cell, of the weapons that would never be shipped, of the lives saved by exposing one man's greed. He thought of Diane's courage in walking away from her father's money, of Margie finding her strength, of Kendra's bravery in telling the truth. None, he said. Not a single one. They sailed into the sunset, leaving the past behind, building something new on a foundation of truth. The water sparkled in the fading light, endless and clean, full of possibility. And somewhere in a federal prison, Rod Greenwood sat in a cell, learning what it meant to be powerless, to be nobody, to have everything stripped away. He'd called Samuel a waiter boy with such contempt, never imagining the waiter boy would tear down his empire with patience, precision, and the full weight of justice. Samuel had waited. He'd planned. He'd executed perfectly. And in the end, the right side won. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.